I always think of personal development as a bit of a paradox, because the whole purpose is to better prepare yourself for the inevitable challenges that will always come your way. So really, it's not about creating a problem-free life. Instead, it's about building the inner strength that makes you unshakable within those situations, which often means that the pursuit of growth is always preceded by periods of discomfort. Meaning, if you don't choose your suffering that will result in the growth in the direction that you prefer, then life will provide the suffering for you in one way or another.
I'm Travis, and I want to help you transform your physical, emotional, and mental fitness, and to also build the skills necessary to turn life's challenges into just necessary parts of your growth. And I want to talk about 3 topics that I've been thinking about a lot recently. One of them is the difference between brain circuits that are activated during self-referential thinking, which usually involves the suffering that we all put ourselves through during times of internally directed focus. Another one is a couple different things that I personally like using and believe to be the most helpful in changing the way those circuits are activated to reduce that feeling of internal suffering. And then the third is simple ways to change that perspective from suffering into gratitude, because we learn a lot through those challenges. And I often find with myself that I learn the most through the struggle. And the main point behind this video is choosing your struggle or choosing your suffering so that you can get the most out of life and get the most out of your path to greater awakening or enlightenment, wisdom, whatever you want to call it. At the end of the day, it's just personal growth and personal development and learning more about yourself and therefore life in the process. And so to start with, there's this idea that I came across recently, which is called the task positive network, which in my readings was TPN for short. And the interesting thing about this task positive network is that it is in direct opposition to what is also referred to as the default mode network when it comes to neuroscience and neuroanatomy. And so the default mode network is something that I have been previously familiar with in relation to the types of topics that I've learned about with the new wave or this resurgence of the psychedelic revolution in a way, and how some of these substances have been very beneficial for individuals and have given them quite a wider view or a wider perspective on essentially what's possible and the types of activities that we engage in ourselves that creates more suffering than necessary. And so one of the big developments, especially with this research that has involved psychedelic mushrooms, is they've been able to see through brain scans and fMRIs that under that substance, which, not to make this all about just psychedelics and substances, because I don't think that you have to go that route, although it is interesting to show how big of an impact they have made on mental health and mental illness and decreasing rates of depression and increasing quality of life because of this default mode network, which is responsible for rumination and mind wandering and time traveling, which I mean by thinking so far into the future and being anxious about what's to come next that you don't know, as well as thinking back into the past and dwelling on memories that you have and maybe having guilt or shame or embarrassment by recollecting these past events that are that are no longer current and no longer exist, but by replaying them over and over in our mind, then we are creating that suffering. Now, the interesting thing and how it's tying into why it's not necessary to do those things if you do not wish to or are not interested in those is that long-term meditators are very good at switching this circuit off. And the interesting thing about these studies, about these people that take one substance and have this different brain chemistry, is that it's very similar to people that have been meditating for years. And so in a way, it's just a quicker way to get there. But in terms of being able to have control over that, as much as you can, if you will, is by participating in as many activities as possible that turns off the default mode network, or what's more commonly referred to as the ego, which that collection of brain structures is what our ego is ran off of, because it is that self-comparison, being very aware of yourself as it relates to your surroundings and what this person's thinking or that person. And so by understanding that you can turn that off by activating the opposite, which is I refer to as the task positive network, which means that you're now taking your focus off of your internal environment and putting it on something external. And that allows you to focus and get into a flow state that you can lose yourself in, and that time essentially feels like it stops or slows down. And everybody can relate to being so engrossed in a task that you forget or you don't even realize how much time has went by. And so by activating that other circuit, you naturally cut off the old. And so you're not self-ruminating, and you're not becoming a victim of this, self-imposed suffering. And the thing that I like about it, and especially as it relates to, the Buddhist idea of suffering, which is suffering is always, that is, human life is suffering. It's going to be one thing or another. But when you choose your suffering, it can become empowering, and there's a reason for it. And now you have some control over what you're going to do with that suffering rather than it happening to you. And so that's why I think it's really important to choose your suffering before it chooses you. And some of the tasks or the activities that I think are the most beneficial is, as I already mentioned before, is meditating. Because even though there's not much going on externally, you are giving your mind something to do and something to focus on. Because it's not about the absence of thought and clearing your mind completely, because you won't be able to, but instead of being able to direct it in a certain direction. And then that way you're exerting energy by focusing on the task at hand, whether it's just thinking about your breathing, or if you're outside listening to the birds or listening to the leaves rustle, or whatever you choose to focus on. Now there is this external focus, and it distracts you from thinking about yourself and thinking about all these other things that we naturally do in mind wandering, which is our brain's negativity bias. If it doesn't have anything to focus on, that's naturally what it'll resort to. And another one is exercise, because I always tell people that exercise itself is a form of meditation, because there is one thing that you're focused on doing, and it can be challenging and it can be painful. And especially when you're pushing yourself, it feels like physical suffering, but in a good way, because you are choosing it. And you're putting yourself in those positions. And the other good thing too is, especially when you do get to a point where you are pushing yourself, there's nothing else that you're thinking about. Like whether it's lifting weights or it's running, you're only thinking about those last few reps, or you're only thinking about those last few minutes of running because you're ready to get them over with. And then you feel that accomplishment afterward, which is, it's hard to get that anywhere else. Now, with other things that are more of a psychological effort, you still get that reward afterward, which is great. But there's something about pushing yourself to a limit where it's uncomfortable, and then you're overriding that natural response that says, just stop, just quit. The more you can do that, the more you're getting control over your brain and body and being able to switch those circuits and repattern those circuits to be able to toggle back and forth. And so that way you're not always stuck in this default mode network of mind wandering and self-suffering by the self-referential thinking. And another one is going back to the mental activities, it's reading. And while that's totally different than the exercise, and there's no physical pain involved, and it's a lot more of a pleasant activity, you're still focusing your attention on being in one place and reading and learning and thinking about the information that's coming in and letting your mind become occupied with that information. And for me, I always had a tough time reading before, so that actually was an exercise for me, and it was kind of uncomfortable. And even now, it still can be, but I'll do my best to sit in one place and focus as much as I can until maybe I need a break, and then I'll allow myself to take a break, listen to what's going on if I'm reading outside or if I'm in here, and just give myself time to contemplate the message that I was receiving until I feel ready and my attention is ready, because it is an energy consuming task. And so then by getting back into it, right, that's another rep. And then you're doing the best that you can to sit in one place, focus intently on one thing, and not let your mind wander. And so lastly, I think it's really important to be able to reframe these different situations that you may find yourself in. Now, that is related to not only these self-imposed suffering exercises, if you will, putting yourself in positions to be challenged, but in times when life is challenging you already. And to be able to look at those challenges and reframe them and find a positive perspective, and sometimes it takes more. I get in situations where something happens to me and it's hard to find the positive. For example, 2 weeks ago, I was woken up in the middle of the night and a couple people were breaking into my car. And at first, I'm just pissed for a couple days, obviously. And it's kind of a weird feeling when, somebody is, going through your things and breaking your things to get in there, and seeing somebody else's shoe prints all over your seats and glass everywhere. And once you get over all of that, or at least for me, once I got over all of that and cleaned everything up and got back to normal and got my window fixed and came back to baseline, then it was easier for me to see the positives, which in this case for me was at this apartment that I'm living at. I haven't known too many people of my neighbors because I have lived here for a little under a year, and I go to work, do my thing, and so I don't necessarily come across too many people in my day-to-day, and if I do, it's in passing, so there's not really much to it. But this time there were so many people outside because it wasn't just me. There was a lot more people that had the same thing happen. And so seeing this sense of community and people coming together and wanting to help each other out, and if some people were trying to help each other, give each other tape to put some bags on their windows so they can drive around without it too much wind coming through, or here it can rain a good amount, so at least protecting the interior from the weather or anything else. And so you have these people now talking more and again trying to help each other out the best that we can, and comfort each other, because it sucks for everybody. So even when you can come together, or make a small joke or laugh about it, or at least be able to bond in somewhat of the misery together, I was grateful that now I felt like I knew a lot more of my neighbors, and it felt like I was more at home in a way, or there's people that I can rely on because I had met so many more people in that time, and that I felt more comfortable being able to talk to more people. And it's funny because ever since then, now I'm much more outgoing in a way. When people are walking by, saying hi or asking people how they're doing. And I don't think that would have happened without somebody breaking into my car and 23 other people's cars. And so there are times when you have to search hard for a reason to feel better about it. And when you come across that reason, you'll know, because you'll feel that shift in your body. And when that emotional resonance changes, that's what you want to stick with. And when that happens is when you've now changed a challenge into an opportunity and into growth, and something that you can now learn from and gain more wisdom and insight from. And in that way, you are choosing your suffering, because you can't always control, and you will never always control, the things that are happening to you. But you can choose how to respond to them. And on a daily basis, you can choose how you decide to spend your day. What types of activities are you going to do when sometimes you don't want to do it? Going to the gym can be hard. And again, it can be painful. But when you choose that suffering, you're putting yourself in a better state, because you feel like you're in control and you feel like you're empowered, rather than life happening to you and you feeling like you're at the mercy of all of these things that are coming at you, and you don't really have any control, but you always do. Even when it comes to that reframe, you can choose how you look at it, how you respond, and what you're going to do going forward. So I hope those ideas are helpful. And if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching the video. My name is Travis again, and I'll see you in the next one.